Hello and welcome to today's webinar on introducing the Copeland Digital Outdoor Refrigeration Unit X-Line series brought to you by Emerson. My name is Kara Barluggi and I am your moderator for today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. Please note that this presentation's audio is provided by phone or through your computer sound system. If you'd like to revisit key sections of today's webinar, it will be available on demand at climate.emerson.com/digitalxline a few days after this live event. You'll also receive an email in the next few days with a link to the recorded event. As mentioned, you may type questions into the text area and hit send in the Q&A panel throughout the webinar. We will answer all questions at the end. Discussing today's webinar will be Julie Havener. Julie Havener joined Emerson in 2015. As the company's product manager for condensing units, she focuses her efforts on the development and marketing of condensing units to serve both the food service and food retail markets. Prior to her role in product management, she has held roles in strategic pricing and market analysis. Julie earned a bachelor's degree in marketing and decision sciences from Miami University. The webinar will now begin. Julie?
Thanks, Kara. So today we're going to start the presentation by reviewing decentralized condensing units, what that architecture consists of, what its benefits are, and also some potential limitations of the traditional units that you typically see. Then we're going to review what our Copeland Digital Outdoor Refrigeration Unit is, what digital technology is, what applications we see this fitting into, and then the features and benefits of the digital X-Line. And then we're going to round out the presentation with results of a field test that we have with our digital X-Line, as well as some additional materials and information and where you can find those. And then, as we mentioned, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So before we really dive in, we would really like to gather some general information to get us started. These are 3 quick questions just to gauge the audience on your familiarity with digital technology. So the first question is, how familiar are you with digital capacity modulation technology? And if you don't know what that means, then obviously you'll just go ahead and select not at all familiar. And then we'll have, how familiar are you with our X-Line product offering? So this just kind of gives me a feel for, of the folks on the phone, how much detail I need to go into on our X-Line offering, just to give us a feel for that. And then lastly, have you previously installed or purchased an X-Line product? A simple yes, no, again, just to gauge how deeply you understand the product and if you've used it in the past. So I'll give you a couple seconds here, and then we will move on to our presentation. Okay, and the poll will stay open for just a few more seconds there if you're not finished, but I will go ahead and move forward. And we'll start with decentralized condensing units. So back on May 5th, Andre Totnow and Diego Marifon presented on future refrigeration architectures for meeting refrigerant regulations. This was an E360 webinar, and actually if you weren't able to attend, I would highly recommend it. If you don't know how to get to our E360 platform, it's actually very simple. You can just Google Emerson E360 webinars and it'll pop right up. But during that presentation, they talked about a lot of different architectures for the future. Each of these has its own benefits, each has its own limitations, just based upon, what type of store format you have, what you're looking for, what customer pain points you're trying to address. Today, specifically, we're going to hone in on these decentralized condensing units. So I do want to mention, though, that there will be some future sessions that, will address some of these other architectures. So please be sure to check those out as well, because each one brings a different, like I said, different benefits to the market. So when looking at the benefits of decentralized, first, just to kind of clear the air on decentralized condensing units and that terminology, I'm basically referring to, typically remote condensing units that are more of a one-to-one architecture. So one condensing unit, so one evaporator, very simple architecture. It's extremely popular because it is very easy to implement. When we're talking about remote units, which we'll be discussing mostly today, it obviously removes heat and sound from the building. Today we'll also be focused on air-cooled units. And obviously air-cooled versus water-cooled, they each have their own benefits, but when working with air-cooled units, there's no water loop necessary or pump skids, so sometimes that has some extra cost or architecture challenges there, just depending upon your location. And it gives you flexibility for load expansion and retrofits. So, each architecture, like I said, has its benefits. And while this has been a predominantly very popular architecture in both food service and food retail, we've talked to a lot of customers over the years and feel there's some limitations on some existing traditional condensing units. So we're going to kind of talk through what those limitations may be. So from a traditional decentralized condensing unit perspective, most of these units, which you can see from my pictorials here, very simple units, mechanically controlled a lot of times, not a lot of remote communication available, no onboard diagnostics. Typically, these are all housed in a square metal enclosure, which does restrict mounting options and sometimes can be very heavy. A lot of these are single speed, just on-off fan cycling controls, and a lack of system protections. And then lastly, these last two, the single units required for every load and each unit individually field wired. Those are some unique challenges that traditional units today just cannot address. So understanding our customer pain points, we actually launched our 6-speed X-Line product several years back with a lot of modifications. And this product offering does address a lot of the pain points and the limitations that I discussed on the previous slide. So it does have the slim profile. It's very quiet. And by the way, we know it can sometimes be confused with a mini split AC system because of its slim profile. But that slim profile enables us to wall mount these units. You can see in the picture here, they can be mounted on rails, outside of even just stores, on the ground. Because they're so quiet, they can be located close to entrances or patios. Energy efficiency, I'm going to talk here in a second on some of the features of an X-Line, and you'll see why it is such an energy efficient unit. Connectivity, so we talked a lot about traditional units not having the ability to communicate with building management systems. Our X-Line product has that offering. Protection, we automatically include a core sense diagnostic, which offers not only to make sure that the unit's set up initially correctly, but also if anything happens within the system, it can send out errors and alert codes to protect that compressor. And then lastly, it is AWIF compliant, which were the DOE regulations. Medium temp started in January and low temp coming in July. So our units are compliant with AWIF as well. So, and as we speak about the fixed X-Line features and benefits, just know that all of these, pretty much every one of these is exactly the same in the digital version, which we'll speak about as well. So keep that in mind as we go through. So looking at the inside of the X-Line, what are some of the specific features that enable us to have these benefits that I just spoke about? Electronic controls. So all of our X-Lines, both fixed and digital, that we'll talk about in a few minutes, do come with the Dixell controller, the XCM25D. This enables us to, it's much more reliable than traditional mechanical controls. It has built-in protection and diagnostics, and it even has a bump start feature. All of our X-Lines have the scroll compressor technology built in, the Copeland brand, and it provides the most reliable high-efficiency compression available. In our low-temp 6-speed X-Line, we have enhanced vapor injection, and this improves capacity as well as energy efficiency. Variable speed fan motor control, this is where you're going to get a lot of efficiency gain, efficient head pressure control, as well as a very quiet unit comes with that variable speed fan. And then larger condenser coils, we gain a lot of efficiency with these large coils. And as you can tell by the blue color of the coil, it's actually pre-coated, which helps with weathering. And it is actually ready to go from a saltwater, ocean perspective. We have this coating on there that protects it from corrosion. And then lastly, the heated and insulated receiver, it allows to operate in low ambient conditions. And all of these features are standard on the X-Line, and besides the vapor injection, because that's low temp only, all of these items also apply to the digital that we'll talk about in just a moment. So You don't have a lot of, all these different options and packages with the X-Line. They all come pre-installed in all as one package. To expand just a little bit on the communication piece of the X-Line, as I mentioned, we have the XCM25D controller within all of our X-Lines. We have that pre-programmed to automatically tie into XWeb, Site Supervisor, and E2, which are all Emerson controller platforms. And I do want to mention, though, that even if you're not using one of these platforms, the X-Line can still be tied into other building management systems as well. But it is simpler to tie it into something that's an Emerson-based product because those are automatically pre-installed. But this gives the ability to remote off-site visibility and control of the system. And we'll actually talk about some of those benefits when we go through the field test site. Okay, so we had talked about the limitations on decentralized units, and we've addressed a lot of the pain points with the standard fixed-speed X-Line. However, as we talked about initially, that one-to-one architecture and individually individually piping and the electric runs for each unit weren't necessarily addressed with a fixed-speed unit. So we have now launched our digital version of the X-Line, and that enables us to modulate from 100% down to 20%. So what is digital modulation? It does look like from the polling that we have a variety of experience on the phone. For those of you that said you're extremely familiar with digital, I'm guessing that you've probably been tied into the food retail space in some fashion, because digital scrolls have been used on racks in supermarkets for many years. It's very reliable. It's a very simple way to have that capacity modulation. But it is newer to the food service side, and so some of you that are not at all familiar, I'm not surprised to hear that, just because it's something that's relatively new on that side of the business. So it's fundamentally different than an inverter-based technology. So this is not variable speed, where the speed of the motor ramps up and down. Digital is actually simpler than that. Essentially, the controller that we discussed earlier, the XCM25D, it will actually detect the demand coming back from all the various loads in which it's feeding. And I know I haven't shown this pictorially yet, but the digital does allow you to tie into multiple evaporators, so keep that in mind. So let's say this X-Line is tied to 4 evaporators. So it's going to understand the demand from those 4 evaporators, and it will send signals to the solenoid valve and when to energize and de-energize. So when its solenoid valve opens, the pressure decreases on the piston at the top of the scroll, and that allows the scroll to move axially by just 1 millimeter, but that allows compression to stop, but without ever stopping the scroll. It will then alternate between these loading and unloading segments, and that will fulfill the need of the refrigeration load that it's connected to. So to give you a few examples, I have down here at the bottom. If it needs 50% capacity at any given time, it's going to fully load for 10 seconds and unload for 10 seconds. So the controller looks at this in 20-second increments, and that's how it adjusts the modulation. So every 20 seconds, it's reevaluating the system and then modifying as needed. So then in the second example, in this case, it needs 75% output. So it's going to fully engage for 15 seconds and unload for 5 seconds. So you can see that it's a very simple technology. It's very reliable, but it is unique compared to traditional compression options. From an application standpoint, we see this tying well into display cases, walk-in coolers, food preparation, and process chillers. So just to give a few examples, when we're talking about convenience stores, we see this as a great fit. We're talking to a few end users on, folks that have, let's say, 4 medium temp walk-in coolers, and we're able to take 4 of those condensing units and replace them with just 2 digital X-Lines. From a restaurant perspective, if a restaurant has multiple medium temp loads, We can tie that into display cases, coolers, prep stations, and our field test site will actually display that well in just a few slides. From a supermarket perspective, a lot of times these are probably going to be smaller format stores that we can tie into their medium temp cases, or maybe their deli section where they prepare food. And even large format stores, though, specifically click and collect options, are also a few examples of areas where this can tie into. And then the process chiller in the industrial market is also another area that the Digital X-Line can fit. So now let's dive a little further into the features and benefits. So the Digital X-Line gives us this multiplexing technology option, which is unique, as we've talked about, that enables us to tie into multiple cases per unit. So in this little picture we have here, we have one Digital X-Line tied to a walk-in cooler, a display case, and a food prep station. And there can be a variety of different applications this ties to, but that kind of helps, give a visual for what this looks like. Down at the bottom, we actually have a list of the different condensing units we've released. So we have a 3, 4, 5, and 6 horsepower Digital X-Line offering, and that's at fully loaded capacity. So you can see here in the chart that there's a green, light green, and a dark green area. Hopefully that light green is showing up well for you on your screen. The dark green represents 50 to 100% capacity, and this is what we call the sweet spot. Basically, this is where we would recommend you sizing the unit within. If the unit can run and will run at the 20 to 50% range. However, if the unit's sized in that lower range, it's just going to be completely oversized, and you won't see the benefits that the digital can offer. So we want to make sure that folks are not completely oversizing this, and we want to stick to the higher end when sizing the units to make sure you can really realize the benefits of digital. So installation benefits. When we talk through what all benefits come to mind with the Digital X-Line, as we're talking to customers, the fewer units to install and maintain has been a huge selling feature. We've talked to customers that we're able to cut the number of their condensing units in half or even more in some cases because the X-Line is so lightweight in its flexible installation options. They're even able to look at lightening, how much their rooftop, their building specs are for the weight of the roof, how much it needs to support. So it gives a lot of initial installation benefits and startup cost reduction. And then simple and quick commissioning. To get the unit up and running, there's only 3 set points, refrigerant, time clock, and suction pressure. And something I didn't mention is this is also a benefit from the fixed side as well. Our fixed speed X-Line also only has 3 set points, refrigerant and time clock, same as the digital. But instead of suction pressure, the fixed speed has a cut in and cut out. So both very simple, very quick commissioning, and easy to get up and running. When it comes to the fewer units, you also have reduced refrigerant charge and line set benefits. So I'll talk about the field test site that we're going to share today, and they were actually able to reduce the refrigerant charge by 50% by eliminating condensing units and consolidating line runs. And then with our advanced diagnostics, we make sure that the unit's running properly the first time and kind of trying to save that contractor the costly callbacks. So with the diagnostics, if they set the unit up and there's something wrong, it's going to immediately give them an error, and they can see what that error code means and help them troubleshoot on the spot and make sure that it's running properly before they leave. From an operational benefits perspective, the advanced diagnostics are a little different on this side. Once the unit's up and running, if there is something going on within the system, it will send out error codes. It will give them, kind of advice in a sense to help troubleshoot and get it right the first time. If there's something going on within the system, it will actually protect the compressor and shut down the system if need be, just to make sure it's not burning up the compressor and sending out those error codes to alert someone that something's going on within the system. Energy efficiency. So our X-line, we've already talked about the fixed speed, the fact that it has, the larger condenser coils, the variable speed fans, electronic controls. So you take that platform, and then we add the digital compressor to it. And because the digital will result in fewer starts and stops, you're going to see an energy benefit there because you're reducing the number of those large amp draws every time the unit kicks on. So there's energy savings within the X-line platform itself, and then the digital brings some additional benefits as well. High temperature control, this will enable, improved food safety, food quality, which obviously impacts the end user's bottom line. And then lastly, the ultra quiet operation. We talked about the, how quiet the X-line was when we discussed the fixed speed, but it can practically be installed anywhere, and it's very popular in very populated areas, especially if they have residential neighbors as well. They highly appreciate the quiet operation. Okay, so I'm going to take just a quick second here, and we're going to ask, now that we've kind of reviewed what the digital X-line is, what benefits it brings, and how, what all it has to offer, we're just curious. We would like to kind of get your feedback on, thinking through where all this can be placed and how you might possibly utilize the digital X-line. Where would you plan to utilize the digital X-line? And please select all that apply. Do you think this would be a great fit for you within a casual fine dining restaurant, quick serve restaurant, convenience stores, small format food retail, large format food retail, and industrial applications? So I'm going to take a quick 5-second break here and let you answer this question, and then we'll go on to the next one. Okay. So I'll probably give you a few more seconds there before the poll closes, but I'll go ahead and move to the next question. And before we move into the field test, we'd also like to get a little feedback from you on which of the following is the strongest driver for you to consider buying and or recommending the digital X-line. So, we see that there's a lot of benefits to the X-line, and we're just curious, which one do you feel is the most compelling reason and the strongest driver? Is it the reduced refrigeration footprint, lower startup costs, tight temperature control, or load matching, energy efficiency, advanced diagnostics, or ease and flexibility of installation? We're just looking for one answer on this one, just to kind of get your opinion on where you think that, speaks to you the most. Give that a second, and then we'll start talking about the field test. Okay. So we wanted to make sure we talked through a field test site just so you could see how the digital X-line can be applied, and make sure that you understand how this can all be set up. So looking at the field test pre-install, this is actually a premier steakhouse in Manhattan. And we approached a contractor about the digital X-line concept when we were looking for some field test sites, and he immediately knew that this site would be perfect for the digital X-line. It had several pain points the contractor was trying to address, and he had not found the right architecture to help this restaurant out at that point. So, what were the pain points he was faced with? They had a aging architecture which needed to be upgraded. They just continued to service the condensing units, and it wasn't, they weren't very efficient, so he was looking for energy savings. These were also water-cooled condensing units. They were looking for a reduction in water. We'll actually talk about how much water they are saving at this point. However, some challenges with choosing a new architecture: they did not want indoor units because they wanted to avoid, heat within the kitchen. They also wanted to clear out this space so that they had more space in the kitchen hallway so they could use it for storage and food. And then the kicker, though, is that they are in downtown New York City, and space availability, the space on the roof comes at a premium. So they didn't have a lot of space to put condensing units on the roof, but as you'll see, the X-line was able to fit that need. So here's a picture of the results. So they were able to remove, I believe it was somewhere between 25 to 30 condensing units from that hallway, and they replaced that with 4 X-lines. So he installed one digital 6 horsepower medium temp condensing unit that serves 8 evaporators. And you can see there's a variety of applications here. He has some kitchen undercounters, a meat aging walk-in box, a meat prep room, a meat walk-in box, a 3-door bar refrigerator, and a 2-door reach-in refrigerator. So a variety of applications, all medium temp, of course. And then he supplemented some of the other larger walk-in cooler loads as well as the freezer with some fixed X-lines. So he chose a low temp 2 horsepower for the walk-in freezer and then 2 6 horsepower medium temps for 2 walk-in coolers. So looking at the results, there's a significant reduction in water usage. They had hired a consultant to evaluate how much water they were using, and it was close to an Olympic-sized pool per day. Just a massive amount of water in New York City, which was clearly not the cheapest. They eliminated the condensing units from the hallway. Because they were able to consolidate so many units and line runs, they reduced the refrigerant charge by 50% and actually ended up at less than 50 pounds for this entire restaurant. Highly flexible load matching, the precise setting and tight control. Obviously, they're experiencing energy efficiencies as well, and fewer units to maintain going forward. You know, some specific contractor feedback that we received, he really likes the fact that it controls the humidity of the meat room more precisely. It keeps the suction pressures even. EVAPs are not icing anymore. It's reducing the on-off cycles, and he really likes the fact that he has that course in diagnostics, and we have this tied into a site supervisor. So the fact that this is a premier steakhouse, they have a lot of, you know, very valuable, expensive products on site. So this enables him to watch that product, and he can watch that actually through his phone through the site supervisor application. So he really likes those benefits as well. You know, I will mention that we hope to have a few more numbers to some of these results, and we will still have that going forward. Unfortunately, with COVID-19, this site has unfortunately been closed for several months, so that's caused some challenges with calculating some of the numbers. We didn't feel it was necessarily fair to calculate an energy savings when the restaurant wasn't actually running. So we want to make sure that's fair. The unit has been running those since January, so we know it's running beautifully. They love the way it works, and we're looking forward to them being back up and running so that we can continue to gather the results and build that case out. So we'll share that as it comes. And the last thing I would say about the field test site is to not be intimidated by the complexity of this field test site. Most sites where digital X-line will be used will probably not be this complex. We wanted to share this field test because we wanted to show just how complex of a situation you can use this unit in. But a lot of the other customers we worked with and contractors we're working with, are simply applying this to 3 walk-in coolers. It's a very simple application. So just please don't be, too overwhelmed by the complexity of this particular site because digital can be used in a variety of applications. Okay, so for additional information, so we have several different brochures and materials available for reference. Here's a few pictorials of some things that we've launched recently. I will say, though, that I think the best way to gather that information, we have our Copeland Outdoor Unit landing page, our X-Line Series landing page. It does have a ton of information out there on the fixed-speed X-Line, so if you're interested in that, there's a lot of QBRs, brochures, manuals, and then if you would like specifically digital X-Line information, I have a box, a yellow box here, highlighting there's a digital X-Line section. You can go to that, and then all of these different brochures and QBRs and such are available there as well. So a lot of information out there. Please take a look, and if you don't find what you're looking for, please contact us. But there's a lot of information we do have out there to help you understand the digital X-line as well as share that information with your customers. Okay, so while we prepare for the Q&A session, we're going to pop up just two last questions. I know it was like taking a test today. This is the last two questions, I promise. But while we get the Q&A ready, just quickly, how likely are you to consider recommending and or selecting the digital X-line for a future job? Extremely likely, somewhat likely, or not likely. And then would you like someone from Emerson to personally contact you? If you have a sales representative, we'll let them know that you have additional interest, and we'll get you in touch. If you do not have a sales representative assigned, then we will find someone, including even myself, to reach out to you and to understand what questions you might have or what additional information you're looking for. And so hopefully we can help you out with whatever you need. So please go ahead and mark yes if you'd like someone to reach out to you. And then we'll give it a second here and we'll start the Q&A.
We would now like to take some time to answer some of your questions. Our senior consultant, Brian Beinasek, will be joining us to answer any technical questions alongside Julie that you may have about the digital X-line. As a reminder, to participate in the Q&A, type your question into the text area and hit send. Please keep the send to default set as all panelists.
Lots of good questions came in during the presentation. Thank you, everybody. Several of you picked up on the fact that we were talking about the capacity control from 20 to 100%. Several of you pointed out that Copeland digital scrolls, typically we talk about unloading to 10% capacity. And I would say that that's a parameter setting that Julie was talking about. So the unit leaves the factory with the minimum capacity setting at 20%. With a 20-second digital cycle, but both of those parameters are adjustable. You can have a shorter or longer digital cycle. You can take it down to 10%. We just kind of there's some details in our application bulletin, which is application engineering bulletin 1412, which talks about those parameters and some of the considerations you want to have. But again, those are just factory settings. If you want to change it, maybe for a little bit more aggressive digital cycle, probably should consult with your application engineer before you do that. Do you have anything to add to that, Julie?
No, I think that's great.
All right. Another question we got, Julie, what refrigerants are approved for digital X-line?
Okay, good question. So the refrigerants approved for digital include 404A, 407A, 448, and 449A, as well as 507. And all of those minus the 507 are also AWIF approved for digital, even though we don't technically promote this as an AWIF unit just because most of the time this will not be used in a single evaporator application. It is available for those unique scenarios where AWIF is required, so it is approved for that as well.
Okay. We got a question about setting the system to control the condenser fan and floating the head pressure. And yes, you can take advantage of lower outdoor ambient temperatures. You can float the head pressure down. Again, there's some parameter settings within the controller that allow you to do that, and then the controller automatically adjusts the condenser fan. Just like the fixed speed X-lines, you can float the head pressure down with the digital X-line and take advantage of those additional energy savings. Another related question is, can you float the suction? And actually, yes. As that unit unloads, the suction pressure will come up, and you'll see that your average suction pressure on the typical system with the digital condensing unit, the average suction pressure will be higher, obviously than the lowest suction pressure you would have when you were running say a fixed speed on-off condensing unit. So that's also additional energy savings. We got a question about 80-biotic pads, evaporative pads, to reduce condensing. We haven't tested the unit with like aftermarket evaporative pads. I know that those are starting to become popular in some, desert environments, hot, dry environments. I don't know that we've tested those on any outdoor condensing units really. But if you have an application and you're interested in trying that, again, it probably would be best if you consulted with your application engineer and talked to them about what you want to do and why you want to do it. I don't see any reason why that wouldn't work. Julie, a question for you. What voltages are available for the digital X-line units?
Okay. All 4 of the horsepower, so the 3, 4, 5, and 6, all come in a 3-phase 230 volts. And then the 3 and the 5 horsepower are also available in a single phase as well.
Good, good. Okay. Got a question about the unloader solenoid valves. Somebody was doing some math in their head and wanted to know about the expected life of that unloader solenoid. Obviously, it could have, millions of cycles a year. I will say that Emerson developed the Copeland brand, digital compressors about 20 years ago, and developed a special unloader solenoid valve and coil to go along with those. So we do want you to use the unloader solenoid and coil that come with the unit. It's a very high life unit. It's guaranteed for the life of the compressor. I don't know exactly how many millions of cycles that is, but it is a special coil and it is for the life of the unit. A couple questions came in, Julie, about the field test. They wanted to know how high above the walk-ins was the outdoor digital condensing unit. So how many stories approximately?
Yeah, I believe it was either, it was either 2 or 3 stories. I believe it was actually 3.
Yeah, that's
above.
what I recall, 3 stories. So the unit was 3 stories above the loads, above the evaporators, and we still see really good oil return there, even though there's that elevation change. So that worked out pretty good. Question about the 2-fan units. Are there 1 or 2 refrigeration circuits? Even though there's 2 fans, it's just a single. It's just a single refrigeration circuit. Well, I mean, the condenser coil can be circuited, but it's not 2 separate circuits. I think that's what the intent of that question was. There's another question here. How are you controlling the temperatures in multiple rooms with a single digital unit? So each walk-in box, each walk-in cooler or medium temperature display case is controlled in a traditional fashion. It's got a liquid line solenoid valve or an electronic expansion valve that serves that purpose. So there's a thermostat in each room or on the case that opens the liquid line solenoid valve, lets the refrigerant flow. The condensing unit doesn't actually have to communicate with those evaporators, so it's just working on a suction pressure setting, as Julie talked about a little bit there. There's a little bit more details and explanation of that. Again, in the Application Engineering Manual 1412, if you want to learn a little bit more about that, you can read about that. Julie, I think you might have already mentioned this, but the digital X-line horsepower range?
Yeah, so the 3 to 6 horsepower, and that's fully loaded, and those are for medium temperature refrigeration applications, just to make sure I restate that. We are, possibly considering a low temp offering as well, but that's probably based on customer demand. At this point, we felt, the medium temp was a little more applicable, and we'll look at low temp in the future too.
Good. There was a question about defrost requirements and connecting loads with different defrost requirements. As I said, the unit coolers can do their thing. They don't necessarily have to communicate back to the X-line unit. When there's a call for cooling and the refrigerant is flowing, the X-line senses that, and it go ahead, and if it's off, it turns on, and it modulates to maintain that average suction pressure that you want. So that's how that works. Lots of questions coming in. Some of them are very application specific, Julie, so I don't know that we're going to get to all these questions. I may have to respond in writing to a few of you, but thanks for all the good questions. They're scrolling through now. What is the longest pipe runs you recommend on the digital X-line? So, good piping practices still, prevail here, especially if you have, a lift and you need to return oil to the unit. So, what I would say about that is we're going to continue to use the piping practices that we have outlined, just want to make sure we have the necessary velocities to get the oil back, especially if there's a lift. So things like traps, still come into play. Question about paralleling with other units. So maybe a fixed speed and a modulating condensed unit. Right now we don't have those type of parallel applications approved, but if it is something, you know, you see a benefit, you want something you want to try, it's certainly something we would talk to you about and maybe try to do some sort of field test in those. Are you planning to have water-cooled units, Julie? Water-cooled digital X-line units?
It has that question actually has come up in other conversations as well. At the moment, that is not necessarily on our roadmap, but based upon customer, you know, demand, and if we see that need starts to really show up, then obviously that's something we would consider as well.
One of our experienced X-line users said, don't forget to mention the hotkey used in replacing the controller. So yes, each unit is shipped with a hotkey that has the programming on it. Should a controller need to be replaced or reflashed in the field, that's a very simple procedure. It only takes a matter of seconds. And again, that is described in our AE Bulletin 1412. There was a question about sizing and kind of a number of questions about sizing and selecting units. So, and how do you do that? Whatever tool you like to use for sizing refrigeration loads, you can continue to do that. So if you have a tool you like to use for figuring out the load on a walk-in cooler box, go ahead and do that. Emerson has a box load calculator which you can use to calculate the load for walk-in coolers, walk-in freezers. For this, if you're going to have multiple loads attached to it, which, you know, a lot of people are doing, several walk-in boxes, simply do your load calculations, total them all up to get the whole load, you know, and then depending on what your required evaporating temperature is and what you're sizing for, you know, for outdoor ambient temperatures, it's no different than sizing a fixed speed condensing unit. So you're going to want to pick a unit, a digital unit, in this case 3, 4, 5, 6 horsepower, that, you know, meets or exceeds that capacity, that worst case capacity. We don't want you to select, as Julie mentioned, too large of a unit. So for example, if you have a small walk-in cooler that would typically only need maybe a 1 horsepower condensing unit, we don't want you putting a 6 horsepower digital X-line on there. Now there is some room, there's some wiggle room there. So we've had a couple folks who have said, hey, I'm going to put 2 coolers on now. Can I add a display case in the future? Do I have enough extra capacity? And the way we sized that unit was, yeah, you can add that extra capacity in the future. So something, again, to work with your application engineer and size it. So Julie, there's lots of questions pouring in. I think we're going to have to get back to a few people in writing, but I think that's probably all we have time for today.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Julie. As mentioned, we'll be answering some of these questions via writing. We'll be getting this back to you soon. Thank you for your participation. As a reminder, a few days after this live event, you can access this presentation on demand at climate.emerson.com/digitalxline, and you'll also receive an email in the next few days with a link to the recorded event. On behalf of Emerson, thank you for attending today's Product Spotlight webinar. Information and registration will be available soon for our next upcoming webinar. We hope you can join us again. Thank you.